Thanks very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Kevin Hollinrake, Member of Parliament for Thirsk and Maltonand, which is in glorious North Yorkshire. But most of my parliamentary time is now spent on working for the All-Party Group for Fair Business Banking. I've got to say I can endorse everything Anthony has just said, and I suppose most refreshingly, hopefully from your perspective, I also feel we are making some progress, not just in terms of asking the questions we're asking, highlighting the wrongdoing of the past and trying to get these things properly investigated, and where wrongdoing is proven, these people should be in jail. Not just that, but I guess more importantly, from your perspective, getting you a system of redress where you can take your complaints, the wrongdoing of the banks, through a process where you are properly compensated for your loss. I do think we're closer than that than ever. I think clearly you've seen an awful lot of press over the last 12 months as a consequence of the SME Alliance's actions, of Anthony's great work, of the work the All-Party Group is doing. But it's not just about the press and getting attention to this issue. We've got to get resolution for you. And what we want to try and establish is simply a fair and level playing field, a dispute resolution mechanism that is truly independent, that can deal with cases, of course, going forward, but also cases going back. And that's the most tricky part, particularly when many of these cases go back 20 years. So it has been a collaborative effort, a collegiate effort. Anthony, clearly, Nikki and Nick for the SME Alliance, the great work they've done, Ian at the NAB Group, cross-party across the House as well. I mean, change comes in politics when there's almost universality of view on something. And across the House, there is absolutely a common view that we need to deal with this issue and get restitution for those who have lost out. So it is Conservatives, DUP, Labour, SNP, everybody's working together on this. We are making progress, which I'll talk to you about in a second. But we don't take that at face value. I know we've been let down before. I know you've been let down before. So simply because we feel that UK finance is moving in the right direction with a huge collective push behind it to get it in that right direction, we're not going to simply trust that or take that at face value. Ronald Reagan used to borrow a Russian phrase in his negotiation with the Kremlin, and it was trust and verify. And I think there's some parallels here in terms of who we're dealing with. We need to make sure, yes, okay, we're willing to sit down and negotiate an accord, a way forward, but we need to verify that is going to work for people who've been through this, because almost every attempt to redress before has been not fit for purpose, which I'm sure you know better than I do. You know, my background is business. I probably said before that we changed banks from Royal Bank of Scotland in 2007, which was fairly fortunate, to another bank, and we didn't get treated quite as badly as RBS probably would have treated us. So I've got to say, though, for 30 years I've been in business, and most of that time my bank has treated us fairly. So it's not every bank that is bad, but nevertheless, that's slim comfort when you're in a situation you are. But of course, what lots of business people don't understand, and only understand when this thing starts to go wrong, is that commercial lending, business lending above £25,000 is not regulated. And we're also putting lots of pressure on the Advertising Standards Authority to actually make that clear when you've got Lloyds doing it, their by your side adverts, which is quite ironic, we would feel, but to make it clear that this stuff is not regulated at the moment. Not that I'm a big fan of regulation, but in the right place we need regulation, clearly. But obviously I don't need to tell you what happens when the power that banks hold over businesses, the imbalance of power, because we've got most of our business lending in 4 banks, and their ability to shut down any dispute, any complaint is just massive. So there's huge imbalance of power. cost you millions to get to court. Most people can't even think of going down that road, particularly when your business has just been taken into administration by the bank that's supposed to be serving you. So, and clearly there are shortcomings in the Financial Ombudsman Service, both in terms of their threshold limits of settlement, but also in terms of their competence. We've seen the ad hoc redress schemes, particularly I think at Lloyd's, the Griggs Review, which is, as we know, has been described by the report that was commissioned by the SME Alliance as flawed and partial to the interests of the bank. And all this, as Anthony quite rightly said, it's not just about justice being done, it's justice being seen to be done. So it is absolutely wrong in our view, and I think your view too, that this can happen. You can be defrauded or mistreated by your own bank to where that costs you lots of money, and that the bank itself, you have to go back to that bank to try and get redress. It's simply wrong, as is the fact that you've got Dale Linda Dobbs, effectively an internal appointee of Lloyd's, looking into what's happened in the past. We have said time and time again to the regulator, we simply don't think that's the right way forward, and have been outspoken in our criticism of the regulation of this industry. This isn't just about justice for you. That is hugely important. Our number one objective is to get you justice, but it's also about how it affects demand. So we know that SME lending is down year on year on year on year, and part of that is because of the lack of trust between small business and their banks, and particularly when seeing the abuses that have gone on over the last 10, 20 years. And that has a very devastating impact on UK PLC, of course, but also it brings capitalism itself into question. That's at stake here. If we don't manage to secure a fair and level playing field, that's what this country is built upon, surely. It is not justice for some, it is justice for all. So we'll be determined to make sure this abuse of power is redressed, that we make sure that whether it be Lloyd's, HBOS, RBS, CUIBG and others, whatever reasons they have taken the actions they have and mistreated the businesses like clearly they have done. Clearly we're knowing more daily about what's gone on and the reasons for that. And you read the papers like I do, and the stuff about the Asset Protection Agency and the revolving door that is the Asset Protection Agency with the regulators is a very uncomfortable thing to see, and we want to make sure we get to the bottom of what has happened. We know more daily, but and I'm sure after so much time without justice, you're probably going to feel, is this ever going to come right? Will we ever get justice? I think we will. It was only February last year, don't forget, that the Section 166 report into RBS was published. Only February last year. And that highlighted much of what you knew, but this made this official. And that report was never going to be published and had it not been leaked. And absolutely astoundingly, or totally unacceptably, that the fact that the RBS, the full report, describes the RBS treatment as widespread and inappropriate, and yet the FCA shortened version of that, the summary report that they expected was to be published, was the final summary, actually said the key conclusion were there isolated examples of poor practice. There is something fundamentally wrong here. And that's why, actually, I believe, whether it was the FSA, then the FCA, whoever it is, the regulator will always struggle to catch up here. It is always going to be a watchdog, not a bloodhound, but inevitably you end up with regulatory capture, which you can say is where we feel we are at the moment. We believe what we need to do is not have armies of regulators here. What we want to see is that we have individuals who can take their own court cases forward in a proper dispute resolution system. So that's why we recommend, I'll come to you in a sec, Trevor. That's why we recommend the Financial Services Tribunal, which is a court-based process. It's along the lines of employment tribunal. That's what we want going forward. Look at employment law in this country. Do we have armies of regulators making sure that employers do the right thing by their employees? No, we don't have that. I employ 250 people directly in our business. We never have a visit from some guy from the government about our employment, the way we manage our employees. But we do have, which keeps us on the straight and narrow, and lots of other employers like us, is that the employees have a route for justice if things go wrong. That's what you need. It's back to the individuals. And individuals were the people who brought all this stuff to light in the first place. It was not the regulator. It was Tomlinson and Turner and Stansfield and these kind of people and all you people here. So what we want is a system of justice that gives the power to the individual. That's the right way to do it. Of course, that's going forward. We've still got a lot of persuasion to do to make sure that is the case. But that wouldn't work anyway for historic cases, where you come in, of course, and you want to see justice. Because, number one thing, that it's not regulated currently. So how would a court base a decision? There's no fair and reasonable requirement for the bank to treat you fairly or reasonably in its lending. And also the statute of limitations would limit any action to something that happened in the last 6 years. So we do need a scheme looking further back. UK Finance have brought forward a scheme on a voluntary basis. That makes you suspicious right at the start, I'm sure. But nevertheless, we do feel there are merits with the scheme. There are things that are decent about it, and it would potentially give access to justice for lots of people who don't have it today. There are 3 big areas we're not comfortable with, and we will not engage with this process formally unless we are happy with it. So we've been invited to join the implementation steering group. We have not taken up that invitation yet. We're asking for clarification on 3 key areas. Eligibility. At the moment, you are not allowed to access that scheme if you've been through another independent redress mechanism, for example, Griggs. Or the RBS review or the IRHP reviews, which we're not comfortable with. We are trying to deal with that. We may not get everything we want in the first instance, but the review of Griggs, if we can make sure that's done properly, we anticipate Griggs, people who have been through the Griggs review, will ultimately be allowed to go in this review as well. Limits to the compensation. The compensation initially was set at £350,000 maximum. The resolution mechanism could recommend more, but the banks weren't obliged to pay it. The Chancellor did intervene following our interventions and others, and has now said to the banks in writing, your default position should be you pay what it says on the tin. So if the resolution mechanisms say you pay £2 million, that's what you pay. And clearly we'll be looking at that to make sure the banks play fair. And finally, governance, making sure the governance of the steering group itself is fit for purpose, and the chair makes sure that happens. But also the system of resolution. It's talking about an ombudsman-style scheme at the moment. Ombudsmen haven't got a very good reputation in this kind of space. So we want that to be an arbitration system, a formal arbitration system overseen by CARB, the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators. So those are our asks. We'll keep pushing it, but we will not accept this as being the right way forward until we have our concerns addressed, until you have a system that will properly provide you with redress. Thank you.